Senator Ralph, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Karen. Thank you for having me.
All right, before we discuss the SONA, I want to ask your reaction first on the Olympic gold coming from Hidilyn Diaz.
Congratulations. She's truly an inspiration to all Filipinos. No, her dedication, her perseverance, and equally important, tinalo pa niya, China.
Oh. And on a light note, di ba? Tinalo China, walang gera. Loaded yun, ha? Loaded yan. Nagsusona reaction na kayo, sir. But just on a light note, you mentioned before the show started, your father was an Olympian as well. So this victory actually touched you even more.
That's correct. Yeah, he participated in the 1964 Tokyo Olympics and the 72 Munich Olympics.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's good trivia. Huh? I don't think many people know that. All right, now moving on to Hidilyn beating China without the need of getting into a war. Let's talk about the SONA. Describe the SONA in full. What did you make of it when you were watching?
Well, number one, it was too long. It was 3 hours. And I think what people were expecting was that how will he address the issue of the pandemic? We do have a health crisis, no? And of course, you have talked about the Delta variant, no? And many people would be also equally concerned about their jobs, livelihood. You know, poverty is increasing, hunger is increasing, the debts are increasing, so on and so forth. No, inflation, prices are going up. So that is the concern of many of our Filipinos.
And what do you believe was lacking other than the prioritization of how to respond to the pandemic? Did you want to personally hear something that was not brought up in the SONA?
To me, the most important, the fifth year and the last year of the president, will be how will he solve the pandemic problem? How do we get to inoculate 70 million Filipinos as early as possible, di ba? What investments can we make to our health system, di ba? Should we hire more health workers? Like I said, we are at war with the virus, di ba? So we need to have boots on the ground, so to speak. Now, you need more health workers, pay them better, invest more in our health infrastructure. I think that's the best way to assure the public that government is on top of the situation, and that to reassure the public that vaccines are coming, are on its way, and that by the end of the year, hopefully, we're able to inoculate with 2 doses 70 million Filipinos. That is supposed to be the plan.
Okay. On a macro perspective, observers actually noted 3 highlights coming from the president's speech that he kept either going back to or gave special attention to. Number 1, kept going back to illegal drugs. Number 2, the victory against communist insurgency, praising the NTF-LCAC. And number 3, mentioning the business sector, including water concessionaires and ABS-CBN in the end. I'll ask you first about illegal drugs, all right? Let's start with that. What did you think of the president even mentioning Senator Bato with illegal drugs, and the president himself saying that it was very difficult to eradicate illegal drugs. He said it was being dropped already in shores, etc.
I think it's more of the same. Every SONA he's spoken about illegal drugs. No? Like I said earlier, no, Karen, the most important is what government can do more insofar as addressing the pandemic is concerned. I'd always go back to that. Yun ang pinakamahalaga sa lahat, no? We cannot reopen the economy. We cannot get people back to work if we don't address the pandemic. More so today, natatakot ang tao because you have this new variant, di ba? You have the Delta variant. So, should we make more investments in healthcare, for example, no? Instead of just talking about illegal drugs? I don't think that is a priority today. It is an important issue. The president is addressing that issue. The public knows about it. They're more concerned about when are they going to get vaccinated. And if they get sick, will they get well? If they're not vaccinated. Nakahanda ba yung healthcare system natin? Ang PhilHealth ba nakahanda bayaran yung mga private hospitals? Nagdadagdag ba tayo ng testing, contact tracing, so on and so forth? I think that is the most important issue. No? Second, job creation.
Okay.
What are we doing about inflation, so on and so forth? I think that is the most, these are the most important issues to the public.
All right. Okay. Senator Recto, I'm just alerting you that anytime, okay, yeah, we might go live with the press con in Tokyo just for a minute. But some critics say it's a diversion. Do you think it's a diversion when the president keeps going back to illegal drugs?
I think he's more comfortable talking about illegal drugs.
All right. What about praising the NTF-LCAC? Did you expect that?
You know, it's ironic. Galit na galit siya sa komunista dito. May red tagging. Pero mahal na mahal naman niya ang Communist Party of China. So, magulo yun, as far as I'm concerned. No? He had all the praises for Xi Jinping, the Communist Party of China. And then galit na galit siya dito sa Communist Party of the Philippines.
Okay.
I think that's totally ironic, Karen.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll talk about that because the president did praise Xi Jinping, saying that he called him when the country needed vaccines and sinabi, we'll help you. We're
grateful to China for that as well.
Oh, okay.
But I know also for a fact that the US and the Western powers have also donated to the Philippines.
Okay. Senator Ralph, hold that thought. We're going to break away just a minute from our interview. Fresh from her historic win, Filipina Olympic gold medalist Hidilyn Diaz is holding a press briefing from Tokyo live. Let's listen in.
Talaga?
Yeah, kindly unmute sana, no? Kung hindi kayo yung speaker, please kindly unmute. Kindly mute. Kindly mute, please. Mute all.
All right. Okay, you were watching what seemed to be the beginning of the press conference of Hidilyn Diaz in Tokyo. But don't worry, we'll get back to that in a bit. Continuing our conversation with Senator Ralph Recto. Do we go back? We are checking if Tokyo is ready. But let's talk about briefly the irony that you mentioned on hating the communists in the Philippines, but loving the Communist Party in China, but praising the NTF-LCAC, frankly speaking. They deserve that kind of credit?
Well, I'm against red tagging to begin with. No, of course, I'm against the NPA as well. No, but I think in our democracy, we should allow the left to speak. They're also elected members of Congress. So, basta't magdala ka ng barel, yun, bawal yun. Hulihin natin yung NPA. Pero yung kaliwa lang, kasama yan sa diskurso eh.
Has the president's focus, frankly, on the NPA moved the country back? But before you answer that, Senator, okay, we are going back to Tokyo. Let's listen in and see what's going on there.
They were saying now, you might hold the gold medal beside you even in your sleep. How was your night?
5:30.
5:30 na ako nakatulog kanina. Tapos gumising ng 7 and hindi pa rin ako makapaniwala na nanalo ako ng gold. Hanggang ngayon, pero hawag ko na hindi ako makapaniwala nandito. Pero sobrang thankful ako.
Siya 5:30, kami 4:30.
Heidi, ang dami nagpa-play ng video mo, your winning lift. It was 127 kilos, an Olympic record. Gusto namin malaman, nabubuhat mo ba yon sa practice? Or is this your first time ever to lift that weight?
Natatry ko na siya sa training pero hindi ko nagagawa. Every time na natry ko yun, hindi ko nagagawa, nagpo-frustrate ako, umiiyak ako, and kawawa yung mga coach ko kasi sobrang moody ako sa training pag hindi ko nagagawa. Pero ayun nga, at least na-try ko sa training. Tapos, di ko in-expect na mabuhat ko yun kahapon. Siguro si God yun and all the people who pray kahapon. Sobrang thankful ako sa lahat na nagdasal, nagnobina. Thank you so much po.
So you've never lifted that in training? Ito lang yung first time mo ever to lift 127?
Yes, ito po yung first time ko na magbuhat ng 127. And
Fantastic.
yes,
Ito na lang. Pwede ba bang masabi sa amin, ano yung nasa isip mo when you were holding the bar, you first lifted it to your shoulders, and then ang comment nga ng commentator ay napakalalim ng squat mo, ng lunge mo, yung footwork mo para mabuhat mo. What were you thinking at that point, Hidilyn?
nung una inisip ko yung technique ko. Sa totoo lang, hindi ko na ito.
Naka-isolate po. Tapos, medyo traumatized.
So, trinay ito way before pa po ng Olympics. So, every week, may training po kami. Yung uniform ko, ginagamit ko na yon. Then, yung sinasabi ko sa sarili ko, yung technique, then one motion. So, mentally, emotionally, physically, prepared po ako. Kaya nagawa ko yun.
Thank you, Dan.
Salamat ko sa PhD.
Dan, thank you. Oh, CNN.
Question, Kong.
Sino to?
Julius, favorite reporter mo.
Give you one question.
Right. So what you're watching right now is Hidilyn Diaz live press conference from Tokyo, and different, I think, reporters coming from different media agencies asking her questions. So we heard Diane Castillejo asking Hidilyn questions earlier on what she was thinking, and it was the first time she had carried that weight. So we're seeing a woman that actually, it's blood, sweat, and tears to actually win the gold in the Tokyo Olympics. So we're back with Senator Ralph Recto. Did you want to respond or reply or react to hearing Hidilyn speak before we go back to the SONA?
Yeah, nakakatuwa to see her during this press conference. At I'm sure her energy is still very high. And I watched the video yesterday of her carrying all that weight. I can't even imagine myself carrying that weight. So congratulations again to her.
Well, what about the weight of the country? Okay, let's go back to the weight of the country at this point.
The next administration will have to carry a lot of weight too.
Exactly.
There are many challenges. Like I said earlier, you still have the pandemic. Then you have a worsening economy. You have an increasing debt. You have poverty on the rise, hunger on the rise, unemployment, underemployment, especially among women and youth. Okay, you may have an energy crisis. Okay, you have a 7 million housing backlog as well. Then you have inequity. Okay, then you have global challenges like climate change. You have a Cold War between the U.S. and China. You have a U.S.-China trade war. You have a technology war. And you may even have a capital war.
The president mentioned
third decade of the 21st century.
Yeah. The president, Senator, mentioned the Philippine economy with investor confidence was poised to leapfrog. That's the exact quote from the SONA, into the company of the world's fastest growing economies until the COVID-19 pandemic stole everything. Do you agree with that the COVID-19 pandemic was solely to blame for where we are today, or frankly, was there mishandling?
Well, clearly, hindi naman kasalanan ng presidente yung pandemic. It is a black swan event, but I think our handling of the pandemic, if you compare it to the region, if you take a look at the economy, we suffered more or less almost a 10% decline in GDP last year. And more or less a 5% decline in the first quarter of this year as well. So I think we can do much better. And like I said, ulitin ko lang, you cannot solve the economic problem until you solve this health problem as well. So again, you go back to addressing the pandemic, investing in our healthcare system, hiring more nurses, doctors if we could, pay them better, do contact tracing, so on and so forth. It will
But
reach to the public as well.
Yeah, but what about the investment climate in the Philippines? I mean, clearly, just recently, this administration has passed the CREATE law, which would help investors have more jobs, at least 1 or 2 million jobs was the estimate in the country. And the president asked Congress to amend several laws, including the Foreign Investments Act, Public Service Act, Retail Trade Liberalization. But let's be honest, is that enough to really improve investor confidence? Or is there a bigger problem? The market dropped yesterday after the SONA.
Yes. You know, I forgot to mention, Karen, you also have an education crisis.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you mentioned very good your question on the CREATE law. Okay. You know, the original version of the CREATE, to me, would have spelled disaster for the Philippines. And we made those amendments in the Senate. Okay. We reduced corporate taxes. Initially, they wanted a 1% reduction every year for 10 years. We made that much faster because of the pandemic to begin with. And many things. No? They reduced incentives for manufacturers and exporters. I think we should be increasing incentives for manufacturers and exporters. And I don't know if you're aware, but exporters are complaining now that under the CREATE, based on the revenue regulations that they have come out with, it will make our exporters uncompetitive. Okay, sinacharge sila ng 12% VAT, but they should not be vatable. They're exporters. And that was adequately debated in the Senate. Another example there of mishandling CREATE, okay, on the revenue regulation. Education, we reduced the taxes on private schools. They're increasing it in the time of COVID when you have an education crisis too. So there's a lot that can be done. And in this case, yung revenue regulation lang yan to begin with, no? Okay, now, yes, the president yesterday mentioned, asked Congress to pass the Foreign Investment Act. Now, if you take a look at the details of that, there's nothing much inside that law to begin with. You've already opened up a lot in the economy. Okay? So, anong pinag-uusapan dito sa Foreign Investment Act? Are we looking at the negative list? Not even. They just want it down to 200,000 or to 15 employees, thereabouts. Okay? The Retail Trade Liberalization Act, we passed that in the Senate already. Okay? It's now in BICAM. The Public Service Act, medyo controversial pa yan. I'm sure we will pass something, but you know, the devil is in the details. Halimbawa, transportation, airline industry. Do we want the Philippine Airlines to become China Airlines? Meaning to say, okay, so telecommunications. Do we want telecommunications to be 100% foreign-owned? And who do you think will buy our telecommunication or who will put up the telecommunications in the Philippines? Hindi ba kaya our biggest neighbor, China, as well? Pag-aralan natin na mabuti yan, di ba? Do we want to open, let's say, in common carriers, let's say tricycle, jeepney, yan ba dapat 100% foreign-owned? What about airports and seaports? Diba? So, maraming debate yan in the Senate, but surely we will pass something. And I agree that we need to liberalize and open up the economy, but also to ensure security. Diba?
So, is Malacanang saying one thing but actually doing another?
I think we should be creating more jobs in the manufacturing sector.
Okay.
To me, you want to create more jobs, it should be the manufacturing sector. So none of these bills are addressing the manufacturing sector.
Okay. Now, quite interesting. So we talk about the economy and the president has a year to go, okay? And we have a 10 trillion peso debt. More? How much is 10.5?
I think now it's about 11 trillion, and by the end of the year, it probably will be about 12.5 trillion by the end of the term of the president. it could probably hit 15 trillion.
And it could hit 15 trillion, you believe, before the president leaves office?
I think the deficit next year will also be roughly about 3 trillion.
Okay,
Same as this year.
with all that debt,
Including payment of principal. Yes.
So with all that debt, Senator Recto, are we spending the money where it should be spent? And the reason I'm going to go on to part of the speech where the president, instead of focusing on frontliners, improving health infrastructure, spending money on that, he calls instead for the passage of the military pension reform bill, which would take money, of course, and he wants free legal assistance for soldiers and police, where some observers said, do they need that? Do they even need that? Was that what was needed today?
Karen, kudos to the president. I am supporting him on his call to reform the pension system for uniformed personnel because it is too expensive for us to begin with. No? And I agree with him that we should not be engine givers in the sense that only for new entrants. Okay, I did file a bill in the Senate. I've been talking about this for 2 Congresses. No, it is the right thing to do, and I agree with the president on that. Now, with regard to free legal assistance, I'm open to that for the uniformed personnel, but we do have.
But don't we have the, frankly speaking, we have POW.
Correct. So maybe that is where we can go. I'm willing to study the matter. But let's listen to the DOJ secretary, get his inputs on this as well, so on and so forth. No, so but to me, I'm open to those suggestions of the president.
Okay, but did you also want to hear the president focus on how to assist, subsidize, support, frankly, the new heroes of this pandemic? You have nurses groups saying, where were we in that whole equation? He congratulated us, but we didn't hear anything of, I'm going to release this funding or what. There was nothing there.
Palagay ko, hindi pa nababayaran yung marami mga pinangako sa kanila eh. At yun na lagi ang panawagan natin dyan, no? And like I said, from the very beginning, no? Ito yung our frontliners, our health workers, they are our soldiers against the virus. No? We are at war with the virus, diba? So we have to pay them better, hire more of them, give them all the tools necessary to fight the virus. No? Improve our hospitals, especially in the countryside. No? Pay the private sector, pay the hospitals treating patients, the private sector. Mauubusan din yan eh. So yan ang trabaho ng PhilHealth. So palagay ko dapat ang tutukan din natin yung PhilHealth. Universal healthcare, a big part of that is PhilHealth. They're the financing for our health. Di ba? So masyado mabagal. And that's why we put in the board all these people, the DOF secretary, the DOH secretary, the DBM. They should be doing their job as far as PhilHealth is concerned. Bayaran nila. Magkano bang utang ng PhilHealth in the private sector right now in the hospitals? Marami akong naririnig na hindi nababayaran.
So is this administration putting its money where its mouth is? I mean, we did see just the releases to certain provinces and areas with the NTF-LCAC budget that was released immediately.
That is correct. No, but what about payment to our health workers? There's a big portion nga pala of the budget that has not been released yet. No, for infrastructure. Okay, and that's where the jobs will be created. So Senator Lacson is correct as well that marami pa sa bayanihan too hindi na di-disburse o hindi na obligate. While it may be true that 6 billion has not been released by the DBM, most of those releases have not been obligated, has not been disbursed. So hindi pa napapakinabangan, so to speak. Okay. That's just bayanihan. And what about the General Appropriations Act for 2021? Parang walang sense of urgency. There is roughly about 200 billion yet not released.
So that's how you would describe, would it be fair to say that's how you would describe government response in terms of implementing projects already? Kulang ng urgency, Senator?
That is correct, because they've not even spent the 2021 budget.
Okay, before we move on, because we are moving on to the economy later on in detail and Bayanihan 3, I just need to go back. The president, of course, hails from Mindanao. And Marawi, rehabilitating Marawi would have been his legacy. So it's 4 years after the Marawi siege, and the president himself admits, and he ordered Task Force Bangon Marawi to race against time and finish the necessary work. But I interviewed Samira Gutok, and she says it's quite disappointing, the rehabilitation in Marawi. Only 5 or a small percentage of the population have returned. Let's talk about the Marawi rehabilitation. That would be a testament to management, execution, implementation, vision. How would you describe that, Senator?
You know, I'm not an expert there, no, but what I can say is that everything you said is correct. We have not recovered yet from Marawi. We've not rebuilt Marawi. So I agree with everything you said.
Do you believe that the president in his last year should, I mean, clearly we have a bigger problem with the pandemic, but how important is the Marawi rehabilitation for his legacy, Senator?
I think that's very important also because, you know, we passed the bar.
Okay. Yeah.
In fact, the debate now in the Senate is whether we should postpone elections. And I take the position that we should have elections. So I put them all together in that. Okay? So baka dahil dyan, magkaroon ng problema sa law and order again in the future. If we're not able to assist the families who were affected in the Marawi incident, di ba?
Would you consider infrastructure projects? The president did mention that during his administration, they set aside 5% of the GDP for infra, which is the largest. Would you consider that a victory for this administration, or kulang pa? Paano?
Definitely. You know, one thing good is the build. Okay, so that we all support. Okay, so we should be spending more. And to including the build is upgrading our hospitals. We should look at it that way. Okay, so kung may build, dapat may health din. No? It's also building our hospitals anyway. No, we only have including the private sector, about 100,000 rooms for a population of 110 million Filipinos.
Yeah.
Diba? If I'm not mistaken, something like yung emergency room natin doon, mga 10,000. Okay? So on and so forth. No? And then we're telling the private sector, o sige, 30% of your bed capacity ilagay natin sa COVID. Diba? And that's why you have 30,000 beds available. 2/3 is private, 1/3 is public. As far as hospitals are concerned, diba? So we need to invest more in health. That's what this pandemic teaches us. So I support also nga pala what the president said, yung creating
Virology Institute,
so on and so forth. So we all support that.
Okay. Moving on to corruption, okay, quickly. One of the president's campaign promises was to eradicate corruption. And in a way, he did say this: it's endemic in government. You cannot stop corruption. Nobody can stop corruption unless you overthrow the government completely. Was this an admission of failure to you? What did you hear when you heard this? What was your interpretation?
You know, every country, the idea really is to minimize that. You know, corruption is inefficiency. Okay, and you want to minimize inefficiency. And in government, there must be accountability. Okay, so that's how you address corruption in government, no? By filing cases against those corrupt, putting them to jail, so on and so forth. There must be accountability. Okay, now having said that, like I said, it is also partially true that you cannot eradicate corruption 100%, because even in the private sector, there is corruption. Whether public or private, there is inefficiency, there is corruption. Nevertheless, the idea is to minimize it as much as you can, have bang for the buck. When we spend every peso, make that peso count, multiply as much as possible what we can achieve with every peso, especially if you're borrowing money, especially these are taxpayers' money.
Now, you have served many presidents, Senator Ralph. Would you say that we have, or this administration has minimized corruption compared to other administrations you've served?
If I go by international surveys, the corruption index, the Philippines has fallen behind.
Okay.
As far as the international surveys are concerned.
So that's one.
So it's a far way to go. Okay. We should be one of the best. We're the 14th biggest population. We are probably number 35 in terms of size of the economy out of 200 countries. I think our vision we should be something like in the top 20. Okay, and we can only achieve that as well by reducing corruption.
Okay,
so we should be in the top 20 best.
And what do you think, before we go to a quick break, what do you think was a few things, or if you want the one thing, that President Duterte, with all his popularity, control of the supermajority in Congress, could have done to minimize corruption?
Spend the budget wisely. And one more thing, no? There is more inefficiency, more corruption nga pala on the revenue side than on the expenditure side.
Worse today.
Like smuggling.
Yeah, worse
That's
today.
corruption, right? Okay, that's from the revenue side. Okay, so focus on that too. Right?
Okay. All right.
So, yes.
Okay. No, we are going to continue our conversation, Senator Ralph Recto, after this short break. When we return, we'll talk about what the president also, he mentioned in the SONA, is the West Philippine Sea. You have people who got confusing messages with that particular message of asserting what's rightfully ours, and they say Malacanang doing the other side. It's right hand, left hand. And then we'll also talk about the business environment, on how qualitatively the environment affects investor confidence other than just laws, and the Bayanihan 3, how important is that in the coming year, and the budget as well. So still have a lot to talk about. Quick break. Senator Ralph Recto will be joining us after this. Welcome back on Headstart. Still with us on Hot Copy, we have Senator Ralph Recto. This is the second half of Hot Copy. Senator Recto, the president, also towards the end of his speech, well, sort of the end, because it lasted 3 hours, talked about the West Philippine Sea. He said, we will assert what's rightfully ours. But he also said insisting on the Hague ruling may lead to war with China. And he also spoke about, of course, the U.S. The U.S. Role in this situation. But ang sagot niya, ang gusto nila makipaggera, do something. Do you want war against China? Reviewing the 6 years of this administration where we pivoted extremely, there was an extreme pivot. What did you make of President Duterte's the West Philippine Sea assertion in the speech?
I don't think we do have an independent foreign policy. I think the president is pro-China. So that is not an independent foreign policy as far as I'm concerned. I think you see it in the body language and in the words that he utters in favor of China, right? I'm not against China. I want to have good relations with our neighbors, right? But like I said, this problem will be inherited by the next administration as well. No? And no one is talking about going to war with China. There are many things that we can do to assert our sovereignty. You don't need to go to war with China for that.
And you even said at the beginning of the show, you said at the beginning of the show that, I mean, just lightly, Hidilyn beat China without going to war.
That's correct. That's correct. You know, we do have a lot of allies in the region. You have South Korea, you have Japan, you have the Quad, you have India, you have Australia, you have New Zealand, you have the US, you have the British, so on and so forth, diba? So, you know, China has become a little too assertive. I think the entire globe sees that. Diba? The entire world sees that. So, and that's why you will notice that alliances are being formed. You know, as we speak, there are talks right now, I think in Beijing, between the US and China. They have a trade war, like I said. There is a Cold War of some sort. There is a technology war going on. Then you have the issue of the West Philippine Sea. China's being a little more assertive. They have a trade war with Australia too, right now.
And what you're saying, actually, Senator Recto, by mentioning these countries, and you can stand up for your own national interest and speak with them, dialogue with them.
That's correct. That's correct.
And you believe that's not what this administration has done?
You know, sayang naman nanalo tayo sa arbitral ruling. No, I don't think it is proper for the president to say that it's a useless piece of paper.
Okay, moving forward, the next president, how would the actions taken by this administration towards foreign policy, China, affect the next president?
It will be a continuing problem for the next president. So it's really a balancing act. No? But first and foremost, protect our fishermen. And deal with their allies. Okay? Continue dialogue with China.
So when
everyone is concerned, everyone in the world, in the region is concerned with the assertiveness of China in the West.
So why do you think is the president sticking to this war narrative? Frankly, in the belief that there'll be another war in the 21st century in Asia, why do you think is he sticking to this go to war with China narrative?
But you'll have to ask him that.
Yeah, but I'm curious, why?
I don't think anyone in the Philippines is thinking about going to war with China.
Yeah.
Diba? No one wants to go to war, right?
Okay, so, all right, since you don't know the answer, I thought you were going to say either something funny or witty with why is he sticking to the war narrative? Moving on to the business climate. I have businessmen telling me, Karen, the business climate aren't just policies. It's actually a mood that you give the country, right? It's a mood. It's an energy you give out to businessmen.
Correct.
Okay, so yesterday in his speech, he did mention once again his row with water concessionaires. Okay, and inupakan ko sila, sabi ko, ayaw ninyo, you don't want it, I'll confiscate your system and let the military operate it. So he said that, expropriate all your assets. But we did end up with a better contract, the president said. And then you have ABS-CBN saying that ABS owes billions in taxes. How do these statements, when ABS has repeatedly said and the BIR said, we don't owe any taxes. ABS does not owe taxes. But how do these pronouncements affect overall investor confidence, both locally and internationally?
Yeah, from what I hear with local businessmen and foreign businessmen, including Japanese, is that they're looking at maybe the next administration. Maybe if we elect, if they're in favor of who we elect in the next administration, then they probably would want to invest in the Philippines. Pero ngayon, wait and see attitude. Of course, because of the pandemic as well, no?
And these pronouncements, Senator, I mean, of course, it did serve a purpose at some point, but what do you make of these pronouncements, the threats against business? I mean, overall, with a 5 years that's passed? To a certain degree, people support the president insofar as oligarchs are concerned, yung mga binabanggit ng ganyan na nangapuso. And that's also because of the inequity in our society. So I understand that to a certain degree. Nevertheless, we can't take it against businessmen who create thousands and thousands of jobs as well, and services and goods na napapakinabangan ng mga consumer natin. So it's a balancing act too. So yes, I agree the government has to regulate better. There is regulatory capture too. So naintindihan ko naman yun. Nevertheless, it is the private sector that drives the economy and not government. Okay. The president in his speech said, I vow to restore jobs. He said this, I will exert every effort to restore the lost livelihood of our countrymen. He said it's increased employability. And many people, many netizens asked how. They were asking, how would you do that? You have a year left.
So that's precisely the point, no? I think the president should have spoken more about that because that is the concern of our people today. There are so many who have lost their jobs. Unemployment is on the rise. And remember, today government is saying that unemployment is going down. But when we count employment, if you work 1 hour a week last week, you're considered employed. Diba?
Yeah. So actually, it's not truthful.
Correct. And the quality of jobs that we have.
Yeah.
Diba? There are roughly about 26, 28 million people today who are in the labor force who are not working. Of those in the labor force, how many are in the formal sector? How many are contributing to SSS, GSIS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth? Diba? In the formal sector, kukunti lang yan.
So, doon ang kulang. Parang...
Doon malaki ang kulang. Doon malaki ang kulang talaga. No? And that's why importante rin yung build. And like I said, no, you need to create more manufacturing jobs as well. We need to develop an export industry as well, a bigger industry. Support our exporters. Wag natin pahirapan sila. Create more special economic zones. In Batangas, we do have a lot of special economic zones and hundreds of thousands of jobs have been created. And that's why Batangas is probably doing better than many other provinces because we have those industries there.
So I'm curious, if you were to describe the state of the nation, what would it be in just a few words? Well, like I said, we are the laggard in the region as far as competitiveness and as far as growth is concerned. The economy dropped by 9.5% last year. That's roughly about 1.8 trillion pesos. And how long will it take for us to recover? Diba? Some are saying by 2023. Do you believe that?
The chances are. Before we get back to 2019 level.
Okay. All right. Last question is now...
2023, yes.
Yeah. All right. When it comes to politics, I'm curious. What's the situation? You are not running again for the Senate, right?
That's correct.
You still have your term. And what about Congressman VILMA, your wife? Is she going to run again for a different post? What's the plan?
That's a possibility. We've been discussing that here in the House, no?
Okay.
if she wants to run for the Senate, so that's that's a possibility. She might run for the Senate. I might take her place in the House as well.
Oh, I see. All right. So you might instead run. So you are running for re-election this 2022.
Yes, but not for the Senate. Maybe
Yeah.
for
Yes.
Congress.
So, and there, how big is that possibility that Congresswoman Vilma Santos might run for the Senate? That's pretty
We're
big
watching
news today.
developments. We're watching developments. Maybe in the next, within a month and a half to 2 months, we'll decide on that.
And does she want to?
We've begun discussing it.
Does she want to? Does she want to run for the Senate?
She's thinking about it.
Okay.
Nothing final. Nothing
Okay.
final. Yes.
In terms of supporting a presidential candidate, eto na tayo, where would you go? I mean, you're seen as not completely opposition, not completely pro-administration. You're seen as I've said earlier, you critique on certain issues, you praise on certain issues. Who will you support this election for the presidency?
Well, I welcome the development of Senator Lacson and Tito Soto throwing their hat in the ring.
Okay.
They have a wealth of experience. They've been in the Senate for a long time. You know, the Senate was made to be the training ground for the presidency, diba? And that's why you're elected at large, so that national issues which differentiate us from the Senate in the U.S., which is also local, state. On the other hand, you also have a young mayor who's doing very well in Manila. Okay, and there is a segment of the population who also likes young, dynamic leaders, like Isko Moreno. Okay, now we belong to a political party. We will discuss that in the party and see where it leads us.
All right. You've mentioned 2 names already. That's possible.
2 names.
2 names. That's a lot of information. Thank you. Senator Ralph Recto, what a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you for all the insights. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for having me. And
All right.
good morning to everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care, sir. That's